The story of Afrika Bambaataa represents one of hip-hop culture's most profound contradictions. Born Lance Taylor in the Bronx River Projects in 1957, he rose from the violence-torn streets of New York to become universally recognized as one of the founding fathers of hip-hop. Yet his legacy has been fundamentally challenged by serious allegations of sexual abuse that emerged publicly in 2016, culminating in a civil court default judgment against him in 2025. This case raises complex questions about how we evaluate cultural contribution when they're entangled with serious personal accusations. Bambaataa's early life was shaped by the harsh realities of 1970s Bronx, where poverty and urban decay created a landscape dominated by street gangs. As a young man, he rose to become a warlord in the Black Spades, one of the city's most prominent gangs, demonstrating early leadership abilities that would later define his cultural influence. This experience gave him insight into channeling the energy and loyalty of disenfranchised youth, skills that would prove crucial in his later work. A transformative trip to Africa, won through an essay contest, fundamentally shifted his worldview. Inspired by the unity he witnessed among Zulu communities, he adopted the name Afrika Bambaataa Asim and founded the Universal Zulu Nation, UZN, in the mid-1970s. The organization was conceived as a revolutionary alternative to gang life, designed to channel what he called the negative energy of street violence into positive, creative outlets through an emerging hip-hop culture. The UZN's philosophy centered on principles of peace, unity, love, and having fun as means of community uplift. Bambaataa's musical innovations were genuinely revolutionary. He is credited with codifying hip-hop's four foundational elements: DJing, rapping, breakdancing, and graffiti writing, giving coherence to what had been a disparate youth movement. His pioneering DJ techniques, including beat juggling and cutting, helped establish the technical foundation of hip-hop music. The 1982 release, Planet Rock, created with his crew Soul Sonic Force, fused funk with electronic sounds from groups like Kraftwerk, creating what many consider a foundational text of electrofunk that influenced house and techno music development. This celebrated narrative was fundamentally challenged in March 2016 when Ronald B. Stinger Savage, a Bronx activist and former associate of Bambaataa's organization, publicly accused him of sexual assault. Savage claimed the abuse occurred multiple times beginning in 1980, when Savage was 15 years old. His courageous decision to speak out broke decades of silence within the hip-hop community and opened the floodgates for other accusers. Following Savage's revelation, 3 additional men came forward with similar stories, including Hassan Campbell, who alleged abuse at ages 12 and 13. The accusers shared common characteristics. They were young men from impoverished backgrounds who had viewed Bambaataa not merely as a DJ or leader, but as a father figure offering purpose and direction. This pattern of alleged exploitation of mentor-mentee relationships became a central theme in understanding the accusations. The allegations extended beyond Bambaataa himself to include claims of institutional cover-up within the Universal Zulu Nation. A Vice investigation detailed alleged efforts by UZN officials to suppress the accusations. Ronald Savage claimed to possess audio tape recordings of Zulu lieutenants pressuring him to recant his story through veiled threats. One official reportedly admitted to applying pressure because he didn't want the Zulu Nation brand to be damaged. An anonymous DJ associate explained that a culture of silence was allegedly maintained because many Zulu Nation members depended on Bambaataa for employment, particularly those with felony records who had limited job opportunities elsewhere. Bambaataa vehemently denied all accusations in his first televised interview addressing the claims. He stated, "I never abused nobody," and questioned why alleged victims hadn't come forward sooner, asking if something like that happened, why you never went to none of them. His legal counsel characterized the allegations as baseless and a cowardly attempt to tarnish my reputation and legacy in hip-hop. His attorney suggested the accusations were strategically aimed at damaging his reputation and deterring professional associations. This defense strategy, particularly questioning delayed reporting, represents a common pattern in abuse cases. However, this perspective from a position of power contrasted sharply with accusers' explanations, who cited shame, self-blame, and fear of reprisal as reasons for their decades of silence. The power dynamics that allegedly enabled the abuse were the same charismatic leadership qualities that made Bambaataa successful in gang and cultural contexts. The allegations triggered significant institutional upheaval within the Universal Zulu Nation. Initially, the organization dismissed the claims, suggesting they were part of a government conspiracy. However, this stance proved unsustainable as public pressure mounted. In May 2016, Bambaataa resigned as the organization's head, and the UZN announced a significant restructure, removing all accused parties and those accused of covering up the current allegations. A month later, the organization issued a formal public apology that marked a decisive shift in position. The letter stated, "We extend our deepest and sincere apologies to the many people who have been hurt by the actions of Afrika Bambaataa and the subsequent poor response of our organization to allegations leveled against him." This transition from denial to acknowledgement illustrated an institution wrestling with its founders' alleged ethical failures while attempting to preserve its stated values. The primary legal challenge for accusers was New York's statute of limitations, which at the time required victims of child sexual abuse to bring charges within 2 to 5 years of the incident, or by age 23. Since the alleged abuses occurred in the 1980s, criminal prosecution was impossible. However, this legal barrier galvanized advocacy efforts, contributing to support for New York's Child Victims Act, which sought to eliminate time-based restrictions on abuse cases. Civil litigation remained possible under new laws. In October 2021, an anonymous plaintiff filed a civil lawsuit under the New York Child Victims Act, alleging repeated sexual abuse and trafficking between 1991 and 1995. This lawsuit also named the UZN as defendant, claiming the organization helped target, groom, and sexually abuse children, introducing sex trafficking charges into the public narrative. The most significant legal development occurred in 2025 when a New York State Supreme Court judge granted a default judgment against Bambaataa without opposition after he failed to appear in court or respond to the lawsuit. While this was a civil rather than criminal finding, it represents a profoundly significant legal outcome. Despite his earlier public denials, Bambaataa's refusal to legally defend himself provides what many interpret as a tacit admission in the court of public opinion. The story became more complex in 2024 when Ronald Savage, the original public accuser, recanted his allegations. In an interview, Savage stated Bambaataa was not a pedophile and claimed their interactions were consensual with someone that he thought was of age. He alleged he had used fake identification to enter clubs and wished he had remembered this detail in 2016. However, Savage's changed account doesn't invalidate other accusations, including those from the anonymous plaintiff who won the civil judgment and French rapper Solo, who in 2024 alleged he was also victimized in the 1980s. Perhaps most disturbing was the revelation that the allegations weren't shocking discoveries, but exposed long-held community secrets. In 2021, hip-hop pioneer Mel stated, "Everyone knew about the accusations, calling them hip-hop's best-kept secret." A Vice investigation corroborated this, citing accusers and witnesses who claimed the alleged abuse was common knowledge in the Bronx River community and beyond since the early 1980s. This revelation fundamentally shifts the narrative from shocking discovery to exposure of protected institutional secrets. It suggests a culture where preserving the Godfather mythology and hip-hop's positive narrative were allegedly prioritized over victim welfare. This dynamic has created generational divides within hip-hop, with older pioneers criticized for initially defending Bambaataa, while younger artists express anger and disappointment. The broader reevaluation of Bambaataa's legacy has extended into academic and institutional spheres. Cornell University, which had planned to house his extensive 40,000 record collection, faced significant criticism and petitions urging them to sever ties with the pioneer. This controversy highlights fundamental questions about how institutions should handle archives and art from cultural figures facing serious accusations. The central question remains whether Bambaataa's undeniable contributions to global culture can or should be separated from the serious allegations against him. His innovations in DJing, his role in codifying hip-hop's foundational elements, and his influence on electronic music represent genuine cultural achievements. However, these contributions occurred within the same power structure and community relationships that allegedly enabled abuse. His role wasn't merely as an artist, but as a community leader and mentor, roles that, according to accusers, he allegedly exploited. Afrika Bambaataa's legacy represents an unresolved paradox in cultural history. His contributions to hip-hop are undeniable and have had lasting positive global impact. Yet the numerous allegations against him, spanning decades and involving multiple accusers, cannot be dismissed. The civil court's default judgment and revelations about long-held community secrets suggest the accusations represent more than isolated incidents. The challenge is confronting the complex reality that cultural heroes can simultaneously create positive change and cause profound harm, that institutional loyalty can enable abuse, and that protecting cultural mythology can silence victims.